this?
Your advice?
That's Chase. No, I didn't. I'm not the wrong.
I'd like to call the East Ascension Drainage to order for the June 11th, 2020 meeting. Ms. Secretary, let it be known that Mr. Dow Wagonsback, he is at an engagement at home. He's having a graduation party he's having to take care of. So we really wish him luck with that.
Indeed.
It's about time he gets out of kindergarten.
Anyone else we're missing? Mr. Chase, what did we do with, I know he was here. He might have had to go out also. So we got Mr. Chase out also. With that being said, Mr. Ogeron, would you lead us in the invocation followed by the pledge?
Yes, sir, thank you. Everybody, please stand, prepare yourselves for prayer. Lord, as we meet today to do your work and do the work of the people, we ask you to bestow your love upon each of us. Bring us together as a council, bring us together as a parish. Lord, I also want you to keep in mind that good debate is necessary to create good laws. And that's what we're trying to do here, Judge. That's what we're trying to do here, Lord. We're trying to create good laws that is going to help your people, your children. And Lord, we learned today that Councilman Chase Melanson's dear grandmother went to spend the rest of eternity with you. And we're asking that you keep an eye over her and that the entire public sits down and gives a prayer and gives a memorial to Miss Lambert and keeps the entire Melanson and Lambert family in our prayers. Lord, we thank you, and in the name of your Son, we say amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Ogeron. Anyone wishing to speak on any agenda item, please sign in with Ms. Liz. Move on to number 4, the approval of the March 9th minutes.
Motion to approve, sir.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Terry, second by Mr. Johnny. Only thing on the chairman's report, we've done had a virus, flood, and everything else amongst all that. And I just want to welcome everyone back. I'm sorry, Mr. Chase also is here. Many challenges, and I really want to hats off to all the workers and all of us sitting up here, because it took effort on all parts, and I just want to reach out and say thanks to everyone. With that, we'll move on to the drainage report. Mr. Ron?
Yes, good evening, Board. Yes, it's been a challenging year thus far, but as always, our team is ready for challenges, and we've done well thus far. So just a follow-up, I'll start off with the tropical storm preparation. Kudos to across-the-board efforts on that, with all the team efforts of cleaning drains and taking calls nonstop all the way up till this event came. Matter of fact, our sandbagging operation, we opened the doors to 40,000 surplus sandbags, and we lost about 30,000 of that during that time. So as we were sitting here today, those guys were merged into their regular 40 hours. We kept them on 24/7, so they've been working day and nights up to today. So they're roughly estimated, they got about 15,000 bags left to make. So hopefully another week or two they'll be stocked back up, and they'll be merging back into vegetation management with those employees next week. Other than that, I'll get into the off-road ditch digging. We have made a lot of headway, even though these challenges have come our way. What we've noticed is with the hurricane season approaching us, a lot of the calls that have been coming in has been results of our pumping events and the weather events. So a lot of these work orders that have been coming in, we've been turning them over as they come in, removing blockages and things of that nature. So our numbers on ditch digging work orders really were not impacted too bad. So we're down to roughly 130 off-road work orders left in total. And the reason we have made those numbers in strides to get those numbers down is a result of a shift in personnel, which I'll get into in a later presentation. But that shift in personnel gave us the ability to almost double our production off-road. And so now we're at a point where you'll see at a later deal, where are we going to go from here? And meeting with the administration and President Quintmaw, he's got some bright ideas about a maintenance vision. And so that'll be a lot of collaborative meetings in the future to come up with what that plan will consist of all the way across the board, because there's many different branches of what we need to do. As we're catching up, and we're doing a lot of good things, but we're never going to be where I expect us to be. We're always going to be looking to improve. So with that, I'll give Mr. Mike an opportunity here to touch on where he's been working on our grants and watershed initiative, but we've received a grant, phase 1, for one of our mitigation grants. And if you don't mind, Mike, go ahead before we get started with this. Give them an update on that.
Good evening, Board. As you all may remember, you all approved us to go to RFQ for design services for the Bayou Conway pump station upgrades, which is in Sorrento Pump Station is what a lot of people call it. Those were received today at 4 p.m., so we're looking forward to going through those, and we'll have a selection committee set up, and look forward to moving forward with that. That is FEMA hazard mitigation grant project. It is to upgrade the pump station and do H&H modeling on the basin to see what upgrades need to be made and the extents of those upgrades and whatnot. So we think it's going to be a good addition to our pump stations and drainage assets. So I'll take any questions that you guys have on that.
We'll start with Mr. Robert. I know you have anything, Mr. Robert? Mr. Travis?
Nothing as of right now.
Go ahead, Mr. Aaron. You okay?
No, I have nothing.
Nothing.
Well,
I mean, and this is brand new, so it just went out today, so it's
came back today.
Came back today.
Came back
Okay.
today. They were, we received the qualification packages at 4 p.m. today.
Okay.
So it's closed, and we'll be evaluating those in the upcoming weeks. You mentioned a few things about the watershed initiative. We're still scoring the projects that we submitted to the Louisiana Watershed Initiative for the round 1 applications. I think there's been some delay, obviously, because of the coronavirus situation. So we've been maintaining discussions and meetings with the folks up at the watershed, and are looking forward to seeing what projects we can realize out of that effort. So
Great. Mr. Chase?
I just want to ask on for some specifics on the Sorrento pump station. What exactly are we upgrading?
So we're going to basically upgrade the capacity. We're going to, first of all, we're going to do an H&H, a hydraulic and hydrology study of the basin and what's there now. And really looking, the idea is to get more capacity and get more water and allow that pump station to do more work for that area. It's limited right now, as most of you know. If you've been out there, it pumps down to a certain level and gives pretty good protection to that area, but it's a small area. So we're looking to get a real life, scientific data and study done on what's happening in certain situations, and then go from there and put in upgrades, new pumps if needed. Fairly positive we will need that, but more so capacity. So,
Thank you.
yep, absolutely.
Mr. Robert?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You had anything on the pump
No.
station? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Ron.
before we go on to the next item, Chairman, if you don't mind, I do have a little presentation I'd
Sure.
like to go into.
Thank you.
John, if you don't mind, you go ahead. So at the last meeting, it was brought up about the roadside ditch work. Is there a way that we could see where the work in the parish had been done and the accountability of that contract? So I got back with the technology department and we really sat down and looked at all of the data that we had and came up with this little deal here, and make sure I got this thing going here. There we go. So just kind of give you a history on this contract. And before we go into it too far, to give you time to look at it, but definitely want to give kudos to our technology department on this. As this program was a pilot program, we need to look at how we are doing things and how we can improve. And so this is one of those first steps that we did as a team. How can we do something different? One of the things was a service that we could contract out. And roadside ditches fit the mold for that because the servitudes and right-of-ways and everything that it consists of is in place. So it's much more routine and straightforward. So this is your history. It started off, like we say, with $250,000 in 2018. And once it started, it just grew from there. And you get all the way to fast forward to March of 2020, which is the last amendment that you guys as the board made to add an additional $2 million to the contract and bringing the total of the contract to $7.25 million. So that's sort of the status and where we are with it. We've dug and tasked out $6,072,135 in work. Of that, culvert labor to change out culverts has been a total of $75,400. We have a rough balance right now of $1,102,000 and some change right now. So here's your map. Technology developed a dashboard of the history of this contract. And it's very busy when you look at the first slide here. And you can go to an interactive map at that link below. And you can actually see this data and click on the different things, and we'll get into that. So the different features are many. So the first thing you can do is select a vast number of map views. So you can go from an aerial map to a hybrid imagery to streets to topographical and many different others. Then you can actually go to the individual widgets of this deal here, and it'll actually break these work orders down to where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So this is something, again, that is a pilot. I want to make sure everybody understands that. This took an extremely dedicated amount of time for some high-end individuals to get this data to do this. So we would like to use this in the future, but be sure that we want to make sure this is known and this is a pilot. So going forward, here's your map of the work that is completed thus far. And if you notice the blue lines, those are the completed jobs that this contract has done. If you look at it closely, and you could turn on different layers of this thing, then they've basically touched every council district in the parish. These contractors have covered what I would consider, and our team considers, a rotation of ditch digging in the parish. No means are we complete, but we have made a basic pass over the parish, multi-tasked by complaint-driven, and also things we've seen proactively while we're out in the field digging in addition to complaints. So with that, some of the other features is you can actually click on an individual widget here and see them individually. As you see here, you can click the line graph option, a single widget, and click on it, and it'll bring that widget up by itself. And so on here, you see a line graph, and what that represents is linear feet of ditch dug per month. So if you follow the line, you can see they roughly start off when this program kicked off very low. They didn't really know the craft. They didn't know how to work in the public. And so getting their feet planted, it started off with 5 to 10,000 feet a month. And then once they really started understanding the work and their routines, they grew to an average of roughly 20,000 linear feet a month. So as you've seen in the amendment summary earlier, the contract grew and grew, and we started seeing the averages per crew was 20,000 linear feet a month. And over the times, we increased the amount of staff that the contractors had, and you can see the average growing. And so in addition to the single line, you can get into multiple year line segments and see the different years of production. And so in 2019, you really see the up and downs, and he kicked off, and you see a spike in production and then a dip. And as we in government have challenges with employees in business, they did. So they had some employee issues, and once he really got an established crew, you can see those statuses pick back up. And when we got up to about 4 to 5 crews at a time, your production goes up to roughly 60,000 linear feet a month on roadside ditch maintenance, which is roughly 11 miles a month that these guys are digging ditches. So a few other features here. Again, technology came through on this. Brian Martinez and his team are second to none, and Ascension is blessed to have them. But each of these widgets, as we discussed, you can click on any of these, but not only them, you can click on the bars themselves, and the dashboards will auto-update and adjust budget-wise and reflect on the maps as well. So when you go to the different statuses of where we were, where we are, and where we're going, you get on to the completed type work. And with that, Brian was able to upload every invoice that we've ever gotten from this contract. And so you can click one, you can click a group of them, or you can click all of them, and they display on the map according to what you select, and the numbers and the budgets will auto-populate and calculate accordingly. So here, you can see we picked one of those invoices by itself. And the map, it's auto-populated. You have to look at it close, and those blue lines will show the work that was completed on that invoice. But the small blue line on the map is an individual road. You can click road by road on this dashboard, and the road will pop up. You'll get a pop-up, and it'll tell you what road it was, the month and date it was dug, the task order it was dug on, the invoice number, the linear feet, the to and the from that it was dug. So it's very, very definitive from the history of this contract to current. In addition to that, there's another option that you do not have to reflect it on a map. You can go to the list type display on any invoice that's been received, and you will get the road that was dug on that invoice, the links and bounds of where it was done, the linear feet, and the cost. So it's sort of repetitive here, but you can do the same features for the in-progress work as well as the planned work. So again, it took a lot of effort here, and we want to assure you that we want to get to this point and look at ways to be better. But our staff, this is a major culture change and move for our employees to get our data-driven capabilities to this point. So we will be continually working towards getting to this point, but that will be far off in the future. So with that, I'd like to go in a little bit of facts about the program, which will lead into a few items that are later on the agenda. So with this work that we did, we have roughly upgraded 123 driveways or culverts. And total spent on driveway and culvert work is roughly $75,000. Now that is just the labor to replace those pipes, and roughly 2,800 linear feet of pipes. Over 100 parish roads were maintenanced by this contract at this point. So we want to make it known that that is an average changeout of maybe one driveway per road that we dug ditches on. So it's not like we're going to change 10, 15, 20 driveways on a street. This is the bare necessity. If our guys can make water flow, that's what we're there for. We're not there to change everybody's driveways out. And one of the key factors of this contract is we let the contractor make that call. but we don't do it predetermined. We go dig the ditch and we cut grade, and our guys go behind them and blow out the culverts with our pump truck. If we can make it work, it's gonna work. If it can't work, and we gotta get the benefit of our investment of digging the ditch, then we make the call to change the driveway pipe out. But also in this presentation, I want to make it known that this same company that is our contractor has two distinct different contracts, which is important to understand for the upcoming item of our culvert policy. We have the ability in our maintenance contract is ditch digging and driveway pipe work, which is related to a public works project for the benefit of public at large. The second contract that these gentlemen and ladies have is a culvert changeout that's not necessarily maintenance of drainage, but it's very important that we set controls and inspect these procedures. And so with the second contract is just setting culverts. And for the first scenario, this applies to landowners that have their first time that they bought a property and they need a new driveway. Or they have a driveway existing as a primary driveway that the culvert is caving in, or you saw in an earlier meeting that most of these metal pipes, or 95% of these changeouts are metal pipes that have caved in or rotted. So with these, the landowner supplies the culvert, the materials, and the parish pays the labor to install it on these here. This program, as well as the maintenance one, was a pilot program. Several years ago, the parish had to offer this service with our in-house employees, which was pulling them off of ditch digging as their norm. So that was a 5-employee crew to go out and set these pipes. Most of the time, it involved an operator, 2 flagmen, and a grade guy, and sometimes a dump truck to move the equipment. This was an RFP. Both contracts were put out for RFP and ran as a pilot. This kicked off in 2018 at a start of $100,000, and over that time frame, we've increased it by $60,000. That brings that contract total to $160,000. There's roughly $80,000 left on it, and over this time frame, we've changed out 48 driveways in this program, and that's about it. I just wanted to do a recap on that, and definitely want to give kudos to Davin Duplessis, Brian Martinez and his team, Miss Liz for the tracking of all of this. It's been a great effort, and I think a huge benefit to get us to the point where we are now. And as I said earlier, with the COVID and everything that's going on, it has been challenging, and I think President Quitmall would have liked to have had a lot more done by now, and we'll keep pushing. And so we will be meeting with the administration a lot more and looking at ways that we can continue to do things like this in a different mindset to continue to improve and make our place better for our residents. So with that, I'll open up for any questions.
Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, when we started this, I can't believe it was all the way back in 2018. It doesn't seem like that long ago. I was excited about this. And to see how far that we have come in that amount of time. Your group is doing a great job. Davin is doing a great job. By the way, this presentation was fantastic. This really has met expectations. And I know when we started way back when, I was like, hey, let's see what happens with this. And y'all have done a great job. So, thank you.
Mr. Core? Mr. Travis?
Nothing.
Mr. Robound? Go ahead. You got anything?
I would like to ask, and I might be putting you on the spot, which I'm not in, trying to do intentionally. But with on-grade services, both the ditch digging and the culverts, do you think, so what's your expectations whenever this next 1.1 million runs out? Do you think we're caught up enough to where we can take everything back over, take it over in-house, or is this something that we would like to maybe cut back on the number of crews they have and keep them on the ditch digging and the culvert and allows us to work on big picture items?
Mm-hmm. I think, Chase, that I think any time that something this big has occurred and this big of an investment spent, that we need to make thorough thought all the way through the process before we make a decision in that effect. And we've got time, and I think that the administration needs time to really thoroughly investigate all avenues of this. And where do we want to go with that? So at this time, I don't really want to say one way or the other, is it going to end or is it going to keep going? I think that has been huge in helping us get to the point that we are today. But I think administration deserves the time to really dive into this more before we get into that.
Well, sorry for putting you on the spot.
It's all good.
Mr. John?
Yeah, just from my general observation in my district, and I'm sure I can speak for other districts, and in some that I've heard from constituents that aren't in my district, this program has been extremely successful. Drainage has improved, people's complaints have gone way down in my district. I'm sure they have in most everyone else's. And, you know, I was a little bit reluctant to think private parties would come do this. And like you said, the learning curve was kind of steep when they started. The more they got into it and then they moved in other sections of my district, the public was very impressed with them. They were very polite. They knew how to address people. They, you know, treated them with respect, heard their complaints and questions, and for the most part, responded. So I think we've done a good job, and I think this program defines how well we were prepared for this recent, you know, Cristobal. So I compliment you and your staff and the administration for continuing the program, and I look forward to what we can achieve down the road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Terry?
Same here. Ditto.
And I guess the other thing we could add to this, you know, a lot of our barricades, they in the warehouse. We are getting water off of our roads. This is some of the key things that we've always been working for. And, I mean, it's just, it's working. So, Parish President?
Thank you, Board. And look, when I tell you this was a collaborative effort to do that presentation, our ID department, working with our drainage department, worked together and done a phenomenal job. And hopefully we can get some resources in place to continue that kind of data-driven productivity and where we are and where we're going. But I do want to note, as we move forward, we make that decision from an administrative standpoint, we want to give you all the information that with these contracts, even at a smaller amount, let's say moving forward at $2 million, for us to do it, we'll have to pull our off-road crews. And so a lot of the drainage improvements that you've seen in the last storm were because we had doubled on our off-site, off-road crews, cleaning some of those off-road ditches that allowed that water off of our roads to get into our major drainage structures. So we were able to do that. So if we choose to go back, we may have to pull some of those off-road ditch crews and put them back on the road, and that may cause some reduction. But we're going to provide you with plenty of information in the near future with that, so y'all can make the best choices possible.
Ms. Terry?
Yes, sir, if we could get a similar type of presentation, if it's possible, on what has been accomplished by our off-road crews, so that we can understand what we would be sacrificing if we dedicate them back to digging roadside ditches. I think if we could get some data around that, it would be very helpful to us as we make a decision going forward.
One point on that, Ms. Terry, if you don't mind, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman. Just realize this, off-road ditch digging, most of the time, can be done by 2, maybe 3 employees to do a work order, because you don't have to flag traffic and the safety aspects of being on the street. So if you eliminate one drainage, if you want to put one crew back digging on the roads, you'll probably cut 2 off-road crews to make that one road crew. So, you know, in essence, what I'm saying is, you know, 5 crews digging out with the contract, as the President said, you may cut that back, but still, that's a big, important factor in this contract that was a gain in doing it. So, yeah, I do agree with President. It will be an adjustment if we go back to doing this in-house. And a lot of liability and things that you also are getting for as disposal of driveways and culverts. That's all in this contract. They dispose of all of that stuff. So we'll get back into that if we need to. We're certainly prepared to do it, But that's things to think about. And one thing I left out, culture change. When this was implemented, it was hard for our employees to understand that and why we did it, and it was scary for them. And so they've done a great job of understanding the reason why. And so I would hope that they would take the production of what they are doing and learn from it and better from it. And so I just want to take the time to thank all of them in the adjustment of this too. And we'll certainly bring that data back, facts for you guys to make your decision.
Thank you. That was good extra information. Thank you.
Mr. Joe?
I feel like that program that we're talking about has done a great job, especially from hearing the comments and seeing the data that has been presented. Also seeing with my own eyes what's happening in the roadside ditches and whatnot. I feel like to some capacity, it would be good to always have that service, to always have those people doing those ditches, just because we're able to address a lot more of the things. We're able to put more people on and less people on when necessary. If we don't have a lot of problems, we don't have to have all those crews and pay for all those crews. We have less wear on equipment. But with that said, we still need our people and our crews that we have now. And that couldn't have been proven more so than the last several months in office, honestly. I mean, they've been out all over the place. I've personally ridden up and down canals that a year ago you couldn't even see water. And now, I mean, they're all sprayed, and it's a process. And I feel like if we tried to commit ourselves to doing all of this all of the time, we're holding ourselves back from moving forward. With that said, no, I think there should be a point in time where we cut back. Yeah, but I think they will always be necessary, in my point.
Mr. Ogeron?
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see that the administration recognizes the benefits of utilizing private industry to assist us with some of our utility and needs that we have to provide to the citizens. We can't be expected to do it all in-house. And I agree with them that the benefits of using outside parties to assist us with some of these options is beneficial to everyone in the parish. And I look forward to having these debates regarding future opportunities to use private entities to assist the parish with some of its public works.
Anything else on this? Anything else on the drainage report? Very good report. We'll move into number 7, the general business. This is A, renewal of professional service contract with Kim Spray. Mr. Ron.
Yeah, this is a supplement to our boating maintenance crews that spray the canals and remove debris from bridges and trees across canals. There are some areas of our parish that are just canopied on both sides, and we just can't get to it, like Bayou Conway and Panama Canal and those type of areas. So this contract was done. It was a RFP that was done. This will be a renewal, and we're asking for a renewal of the professional service contract to Kim Spray South for tree removal in Bayou Conway and other major channels. And this is an amount of not to exceed $100,000.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Johnny, second by Ms. Terry. Any opposition to the motion? Not, motion passed. Move on to B, the culvert policy. Mr. Ron.
So this is an item up for discussion. I believe you guys had a draft out in your packets. And for the most part, as I described in the presentation, the first two scenarios are what we feel like is working. We don't really need to change a whole lot. But there are some areas that we need to look at for is when we get in the field and we're doing maintenance, and we get to a line of culverts that may not necessarily be designed the way they are in the field. In other words, somebody put culverts in a ditch and eliminated the ditch, and maybe metal pipes that have collapsed or whatever the case may be, and it might be determined that that whole line of pipe to fix the drainage needs to come out. Well, the question is, what will the parish do in response to that scenario? So with that, we're looking for a recommendation here to offer to put the ditch back open and provide a driveway back. In other words, whatever the existing driveway of that property is over this line of pipe, it's gonna either be closer to 20 feet or 40 feet. Whatever that is, provide the driveway back like in kind, but the rest of the line of pipe that would need to come out would need to be replaced by the landowner. So we have a lot of this in the parish that are old, deteriorated, mainly metal pipes. And so I don't know that the budget can sustain replacing all of that in the future, and it's a lot of them. So we need to come up with a consistent response to these areas and how we want to implement that and put it in policy. So that's one that we've not had in the past. So that's one thing that we're looking to add into here. And also a permit fee. In the past, we have not collected it, but there is on the books a $50 permit fee that we would like to start through planning collecting. And also, that is a fee for your access. So if you want to do more than the 20 or 40 feet, I believe planning's got the fee schedule that they would most likely take our recommendation from this meeting and revise the policy of what we discussed tonight. And we'll probably bring it back to you guys at the next meeting for a clear draft overview of what we discussed tonight. And then we'll make a recommendation to the council to make that the new policy and even maybe implement this into an ordinance. So those are the two things that I think really are going to change or that we need to add. And other than that, we're just looking for direction which the board wishes to do here. That scenario. We got a lot in the parish.
Appreciate that, Ron. Discussion, go ahead, Mr. Roebuck.
I remember discussing this before, and I'm gonna make the same comment I made then. We're discussing if they had pipe in the ground, culvert in the ground, the parish will go over there and remove any crushed or any damaged culvert, and will replace the culvert under the driveway at the owner's expense, but y'all will put the labor, y'all will actually install it, right?
In this case, we would dig it up and put the driveway back, cost of the parish, for the width of the driveway.
Including the
before we
culvert
dig
there.
it up, including the culvert.
Okay,
But
now,
the rest of the line of culverts is cosmetic.
now the rest of the line of culverts, like you're saying, whether it be corrugated steel or what have you, if it's damaged, it's gonna have to be dug out to the ditches that you're talking about with the grade that you're talking about. And my thing is, if they already have culverts down there, and you already have to spend the labor and the work digging it to grade, I feel we should offer the option, if they provide the culvert, the parish will put it in the culvert in that open ditch in those areas. I mean, I really don't feel like that much difference in work. You're really just throwing dirt on top of it after they're providing the culvert. I'd like to see that in there.
I would say with that, I would caution the fact that we may want to limit it to the time frame we go do the work.
Absolutely,
Don't
yeah.
wanna
Well, no,
dig
and
an
you,
open ditch and have to remobilize and go back.
absolutely.
I'll take that point.
To the work when y'all would do the ditch, because I mean, once you dig the grade, the work's done. So either they put the culvert, or you put the culvert, or you don't, at that point in time.
Mr. Travis. Mr. Corey.
A question for legal. Mr. Martin,
Yes, sir.
what are the liabilities that we face in making that sort of a determination on removing their culverts and then taking on the burden of putting them back in place? And then two, that's not the liabilities, but expectations. Are there any state or are there any current parish ordinances, parish guidelines that we must follow to comply with their, with this plan?
No, what you got to remember is everything we're talking about right now is going to be in a dedicated public drainage servitude already. So as the drainage board, you guys have an obligation to keep positive drainage. And Ron used the word, some of this stuff is cosmetic. Now, I think there's going to be different scenarios that you got to look at across the board because, if it's a damaged culvert, that creates a certain situation. But there's certain situations where we're doing road projects or we may be altering drainage in an area where we may have to upgrade the sides of the pipe. So I would caution you guys from just taking a complete across the board, this is the thing, and maybe put in a couple parameters to prevent that. It goes back to basically everything in government. You don't have the money to fix all the infrastructure, and you as the legislative body, you have to prioritize what you're gonna take. So when we had this conversation, one of the thoughts we had was, it sounds like a lot, but you guys need to exercise legislative discretion in approving some of these things. So we talked about putting a consent agenda item on the drainage board, for different culverts, and then allow the administration to prioritize at what point in time they're gonna change it out. But to sum up and answer your question quickly, as far as the obligation, we don't have any legal obligation to return it back to a culvert. Our obligation is for positive drainage.
Thank you, sir.
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Malonzo.
What Cody just mentioned, we had a meeting a few weeks back, and my issue with the consent agenda, I'll come in here, is if they're cleaning ditches and there's, 17 culverts that they think for the month of May that need to be replaced. Instead of our equipment being there, they judge it's bad and they bring it back to us. I almost feel like we're micromanaging our DPW department, and I think we should trust those guys to make the judgment. And from what I understand, our contractor does that now and does a good job with it. If they're there and they make the call that it needs to be replaced, then it just makes more sense, resources, time, money, to do it while they're there instead of sending, having a consent agenda for us every month.
And look, Councilman, so I don't disagree with you one bit on it. I would just say maybe we need to add some more parameters and some more triggers into this policy as to when we make what decision. Because one of the things we talked about when we were going through this thing is, when are we going to pay for it? How are we going to return it? There's not a whole lot of definitions in this policy as to making that decision, and it's leaving a lot on the administration, and it's leaving a lot of, trying to take the politics out of it, I think, is what the administration is trying to do by upgrading, by coming to it and bringing this policy. So I think
we all are. I think that's our end game for
and I think we
everybody.
need to just put a few more parameters, a few more triggers in this to take some of the gray area out.
Right, and just have it black and
And
white.
it doesn't
and
have to
send-
go all the way to a consent agenda that comes up to you guys that slows everything down, That may be the most extreme. There's probably a middle ground. We can come back to the table and come back next month and see if Ron can figure out some of those triggers to bring back to you.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr.
Chairman.
Terry.
Yes, Cody, would you recommend that any policy written, once it's complete, that we go to ordinance with that policy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
Mr. Johnny.
At this point, I make a motion, we send this back to administration for fine tuning and bring it back to us next month.
Sure.
Second.
Past President.
Thank you, Chairman. Just the one thing to consider here, and we've had discussions with legal a lot about the returning of in between the driveways. All right, so this was once an open ditch. The property owner then comes and puts down culverts and drop inlets, pays for all that, puts things. Whether it's degradation of metal pipe deteriorating or roots that has jammed it up and it does all. So the question becomes is, do we pay for a cosmetic change, or are we responsible to fix the drainage and replacing it back to open ditch as it originally was before the property owner made the private investment into that? And I think that's where we get into a little tricky area with a lot of the AG opinions that me and legal have poured over on what that 50% benefit is to the public versus the private. And so that's just something for us all to consider as we move forward in writing this policy. Thank you.
Very good. Also, anyone else? Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Malonzo.
We do address that though in this policy right here on page 2. Page 2, under the replacement and upgrade, go under 2A2. Should the owner desire to replace the frontage piping, he or she will be responsible for purchasing the required piping with sizing and catch basin approved by the parish engineer.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It was just, Councilman Roberry had suggested that we may do that while we're out there. So it was brought up to do something different than what's stated here. And so I just wanted to make that comment in reference to
Okay.
Mr. Roberry's comments. Thank you.
And I'll go ahead and add to that, also, we need to figure in right away. Some of the, some folks, they own to the other side of the road. Some of them own to the middle of the road. And like Cody's saying, we'll always be in our right of way, but sometimes on some of these roads, we find that's different. What I'd like to see is that y'all able to negotiate right of way issues while you're in there either resizing or changing these covers, because I want to thank y'all. I had Carpenter's Chapel Road. The biggest thing right now with all of this is going on is cypress trees with cypress knees. They are taking over everything. So, I'd like to also give y'all the authority to work with acquiring right-of-way, and if you have to use it with culvert replacement. That's something that legal you can look into, but some of this is not all cut and dry. You have some right-of-way issues, so I'll leave it with that. And we'll come back with this next month with the covered policy with these revisions here. Thank everyone for that. We're going to C, the bulkhead. Mr. Ron?
Yeah, so this is sort of the same thing. They never really had a really ironed out policy on this. And I think one thing that the new administration's come in and really instilled in us is we need to get our policies implemented and clear and almost in ordinance, if not in ordinance, to where there's no question when these items come up, we have a process and a procedure that we follow and it's an ordinance. So the bulkhead program that we all heard about or have seen in the past has a lot of work that needs to be done to it. And so in the past, we would go into cooperative endeavor agreements with landowners, and the parish would put up $7,500 for materials. And sometimes on these bulkheads, a property can cost up to $20,000 to $40,000 at times to bulkhead along a waterway. So it wasn't really a very good policy in the fact that it was lacking inspections and merit to the actual bulkhead itself. So you look into this, property owner would be considered for $7,500 for construction of bulkhead if the following conditions are met. That the installation of a bulkhead would provide benefit to the drainage in the parish, not only for the individual landowner. And the property owner shall contact with, obtain structural engineering design or drawings for the bulkhead placed in the waterway within the parish. The property owner must coordinate also and obtain permits, a letter of no objection from any state and federal agency or having jurisdictions over the waterway, as seen in paragraph 17504 of Appendix 5 Drainage Regulations of Unified Land Development Code. So if that landowner meets the mentioned criteria, then they would maybe qualify for the $7,500 to come to you guys to go into cooperative endeavor to actually do the bulkhead construction. But there may be people or residents that don't really want to go through process A and just go straight into process B and go build a bulkhead. They may not even come to us. And so we also don't have a procedure in place or a permit in place to construct a bulkhead. So it's really not a regulated craft right now. So that needs to be fixed. So also in this process, we've got the permit. And under B1, you see a property owner shall apply for a bulkhead permit in Ascension Parish Building Department through the My Government Online link, and after payment of $350 permit fee, the submission of required documents outlined above. So they still have to get those documents. Submit the documents will be reviewed by the parish engineer, and the application will be scheduled at the meeting for the appropriate drainage board presentation for the applicant to get to approval or dismissal. If the board approves the installation, the permit will be issued for the applicant to be eligible for the $7,500 reimbursement. After that, the inspection by the Ascension Parish Drainage Department must be scheduled prior to beginning the bulkhead installation. Once the initial inspection has been completed, installation by the landowner contractor may begin. As each project will require inspection, the nature of each specific project may require the execution of a whole harmless agreement prior to installation. So once installation is completed, the inspector shall perform a final inspection and close out the permit. Once the installation is completed, the landowner must submit receipts for construction of bulkhead to the Drainage Department to receive the $7,500 reimbursement. Purchase of piles and timbers may, and any auxiliary materials are the responsibility of the applicant. So that pretty much lays out where we're headed. But we also need to look, and we've been working with the planning department on this as well, is people that may not even want to get a permit, just go start building a bulkhead, the code enforcement of that. And so this will be the start to getting a procedure in place and an ordinance in place that we can regulate the construction of bulkheads. So that's open for discussion.
Any discussion on bulkhead, Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, I think this is a good start. I was looking at section A1, the installation of the bulkhead must provide a benefit to drainage in the parish and not only for an individual landowner. 3 questions. How is this determined? Who would determine it? And what I would like to see as a part of that is some requirement for this to be documented and saved to prevent, the allegations later on of favoritism or that sort of thing.
Yes, I would say on your questions, that would be done by their structural engineer that they would be required to hire. And so our engineer would be just verifying that their engineer stamps and pretty much states that that requirement is met. So their engineer would do that.
Okay, and they would document that it's for the benefit of the parish?
Yes.
Okay. As long as it's documented, that's what I'd like to see, is make sure that we have it documented and saved in our records also, so that later
Right.
on, if somebody makes an allegation that so-and-so had their bulkhead made because they're friends with so-and-so, we can say, no, this is documentation
Right.
that it was done for the benefit of the parish.
Well, this will start going through the fees being collected by planning, so they'll be involved in this too.
Okay.
And there will be tied to the address and whatnot through the permitting process of planning. But our drainage engineer will also be vetting the designs.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. John?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question, Ron. Some of the constituents in my region, my district, have approached me about, as the water rises and falls with floods, rivers, Francois Bayou, New River Bayou, it goes up, it comes down, and there's erosion. Now, the erosion, if you want to get picky, could say it does cause a drainage problem because it's putting silt into the waterway, preventing drainage. But do we want to stick with strictly benefit to drainage, or can we put language in there, something to the extent of erosion of that property creating a problem as well for the landowner? I mean, it's a real happening.
Mr. President?
Let's take the Amite River, for example. It's not regulated by pumps or anything. It's just natural. You have natural erosion there. So I just don't want to, maybe we'll be very careful in us doing those type of things and solving people's erosion. When they buy a riverfront property, erosion is an expectation of what they're buying. And so I just think we need to be very careful when we get into that territory of fixing someone's erosion problem and they bought on a tributary or a river or a stream. It's just I want us to be cautious and make sure we're legally covered on the legal end.
Sure. Mr. Chase?
So my question is, in the permitting process, let's just say I want to put a bulkhead and I'm not applying for the $7,500, are all the same exact steps necessary for it?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I see Eric back there. Don't be so subtle next time. Okay, I mean, I'm just asking, so if you do buy property and you want to put a bulkhead down, some of this might add up to more than $7,500, just what we're requiring of them to put a bulkhead. So I just wanted to ask that question.
Ms. Terry?
Yeah, I think I share Chase's concern, and I see where he's going on that. If I just want to beautify my property, I don't want the parish to pay me anything for it. I just want a bulkhead. Then I've got to come to the drainage board meeting and get permission. I mean, I can't put a bulkhead in without a, it's going to be a company that is capable of doing that. Those folks know what they're doing, generally speaking. I'm sure we've seen some bad ones, but generally they do. So tell me why somebody, and I'm not saying I don't want to do that, I'm just asking, why would someone who doesn't want government to pay for it, is just wants to pay the $350, they're going to get the appropriate people to put in their beautiful bulkhead because they want to bulkhead their land, have to come here to get permission? What are we going to provide them?
Mr. President?
Thank you, Chairman. What we're trying to avoid, and I'm going to use a lesser situation, and then fall back. We're even looking at doing a small fee for a fence permit to ensure that fencers are not being put in our drainage servitude, which is a constant problem for us to maintain our canals and ditches and streams. So even doing that to allow that doesn't happen, to avoid us having to go and ask for a resident to remove a fence for us to clean a bank. So this concept is in two parts. One, we are ensuring that they don't damage the capacity flow of the stream or river, and that's why we require culverts and dimensions and sizes of those culverts to ensure that we can maintain flow. Our concern is that they move that bulkhead out into the stream too far, down that slope of that bank, reducing capacity of that river structure. If we have no control process in ensuring that they're not, then they can simply do that and we have no recourse. The second part is on this New River project, we had run across a situation where the soft part of the lower bank was deemed wetlands. And without them requiring a core permit and presenting to us, they could be damaging wetlands by putting that bulkhead, just as we're doing this dredging project on New River. So those are the two things to consider.
May I
on that topic.
follow up?
Sure.
I get all that. I thank you for reminding me of all those things. What I don't understand is, that's fine for that to happen at the permit level. I'm fine with that. I feel comfortable with that. Make me comfortable with them having to come here to the drainage board meeting and ask for permission. Nobody's going to come here and ask for permission to put up a fence. They're going to go to the permit office, and they're not going to come to the Planning and Zoning Commission or to this body and say, you've got to get permission from that board to do it. My major concern is why they have to come here.
Ms. Terry, can I chime in before the
Yes,
administration
please.
responds on just a couple of things on it? I think one thing we probably need to do to this policy, and look, there's a lot of work that got it to this point, and we're vetting it now, but when we say any waterway, I think we need to limit that to basically public drainage servitudes or stuff that we have declared as major drainage. Clint, is the intent for this to apply to like subdivision ponds and et cetera, where people put bulkheads? Okay, so I think we need to go ahead and we need to clean that language up to make sure, because it just says any waterway within the parish right now, so we need to catch that.
Okay.
And then to your second point, Ms. Terry, and I'll offer this and the administration can respond to it, but if the applicant is not requesting the $7,500 reimbursement, does it need to come to Drainage Board? I understand the
No,
other
it does
things that
not.
need to be done, but maybe that doesn't need to come to Drainage Board and that solves your problem, Ms. Terry.
Yeah, I would feel much more comfortable with that. Thank you very much. I appreciate the flexibility.
All right. Any other add-ons for the bulkhead policy? If not, that will also come back. We'll move on to D, the bridge. Mr. Ron?
Just go open this up for discussion. The current policy and whatnot is really for maintenance of drainage projects. It doesn't really get into maintenance of these private bridges that cross our waterways. So was asked, do we have a list and whatnot? And we do have some documentation of an inventory of these, and it's in excess of over 200 throughout the parish. So, we can go into discussion about it and see where we go.
Mr. Robert,
I'll defer.
Travis, anybody?
There is right
Mr.
now.
President?
This one's different than the other two. This one is really, really tricky, and that's why we weren't able to present you with anything, and we want to just open it up discussion. The situation with the bridges is the expense. There is a massive amount of money that can go into the repairs of a bridge. And so this is where we get into a very tricky thing. In establishing our list, and we'll let Cody talk a little bit about the legal side of establishing our list, the definition and what we were kind of leaning to and conversing, and this is just for informational purposes only. Let's identify the bridges that we use in our maintenance program. What do we use to cut grass? Where do we need to pass? Let's say we got a canal or a ditch between a mile stretch or a mile and a half of road, and there is a cross point midway. Well, if there wasn't, then we'd have to go all the way down and possibly have to turn around, track back, and then get on the other side of the road. So what bridges would be identified that would be a big use for us in doing that? And then maybe having that list even put into an exhibit or an ordinance, but we'll let Cody touch base on that a little bit. And that was the difficult part. And there's a lot of these bridges that we repaired in the past where we had the owner sign that we would never spend money on them again. Well, then now those years have passed and decades have passed, and now they're coming back and asking us to repair them again. And so this one is tricky. This one we had a really, really tough time, and I'll let Cody expand on some of the legal parameters of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the issues with bridges is not only do we want to, it's we legally can't. There's a litany of AG's opinions and case law on it that says for us to go and spend money on a bridge, there has to be a public purpose associated with it. We need it for drainage, we need it to access drainage. And one of the issues that we constantly run into, and this goes back to the police jury days, a lot of these situations, we paid for the initial installation of the bridge, whether it was in the 70s, 80s, early 90s. And, that's always the point that's brought up by the landowners, hey, will you put the bridge down? And unfortunately, the law has expounded over time, and we can't legally go spend to pay for 100% correction to these bridges. So the first step was getting a list, which I think the administration is doing a good job of doing. The second part is probably to go out there and make a determination as to what bridges do we actually need to maintain drainage. Because the law only allows us to spend public monies to, and we have AG opinions that were actually written to Ascension Parish on this particular issue, and I'll forward copies to everybody. But that's going to be the hard determination to make, is what bridges are the most beneficial for access to drainage and maintenance of drainage. And that's what the administration is going to have to take the next step of figuring out how we come up with that list to bring to you guys.
Mr. Robert?
Out of that list of those bridges, how many of those bridges are the only egress-regress to someone's home?
Most all of them. That's what the purpose, I would say primary purpose of these bridges are, is property owners that have a drainage ditch that cuts their property into pieces, and they have to have the bridge to get to the other side. Most times, the bridge may be on the other side, the house may be on the other side of the channel. And so.
So we're talking about residences here, not just
Yes,
property.
not parish roads. This is out in the off-road drainage systems in the parish.
And to access their home, not a bridge on the back of their property or anything. So this is all homes.
It's both. And they're different types. You got metal rail car bridges, and you have wood timber bridges. And it's just a big hazard.
That's just
Lot of
one
expense.
figure I'd like to see, though, is how many of them are the only option to get to and from someone's home, not just on their property or anything else like that.
The only thing that would would tell you, Councilman Robert, on that particular issue is the law is very clear that we can't take that into consideration. In other words, if we're going to spend public monies on it, it has to be for a drainage purpose, not for an access purpose for residents.
Well, we would be able to look at it in the aspect of if a bridge is to the point of disrepair and it falls into our drainage servitude, are we now going to remove that bridge for the drainage servitude and them no longer be able to live there? That's where that comes into
The
question.
problem is, it's not,
Now, I'm not talking about going to fix it before something major like that would happen. I'm talking about something that we're gonna have to do work on it regardless, because now it is impeding the drainage.
well, yeah, but the case law is pretty clear on it that the only thing you can do if it's impeding drainage is remove it. You can't replace it. And that's what it goes back to. You have to, you can't use the argument that, oh, well, the bridge is caving in, it's impeding drainage. The law says you can take whatever steps is necessary to preserve drainage, but not necessarily rebuild the bridge. And I'll send you all the AG opinions on everything, and so y'all can kind of get versed in it. It's a fine line, and it creates an issue for us a lot. So I think if y'all have that background, maybe this conversation would be a little more fruitful in the parameters that the administration is having to deal with.
Sure. Mr. Corey?
Cody, that's the same concept as we were talking earlier about culverts, that our obligation is to remove the culvert that's impeding drainage, but we don't have the obligation because we can't use public funds to pretty up someone's yard? Is that sort of the same?
It is, it's just different layers on it. It's
Yeah.
probably a little more complicated when it comes to bridges, because bridges have multi-use. Culverts are basically there for drainage purposes and drainage purposes only. Bridges, you have different issues, you have different accesses for, to spend money, it has to be for drainage, but bridges have multiple uses, which just adds more factors to that consideration.
Thanks.
Mr. Chase, you had anything? Anything?
Just,
Well,
Dempsey.
what I'd like to add, Mr. President, if you don't mind.
just
Go ahead,
one
Ms. Terry.
thing. So, look at what we could do. I mean, remember when this bridge came up that we had to, I think we approved fixing it. The gentleman was elderly. He lived on the other side. He had health problems. If the bridge is gone and he can't access his house, nor can law enforcement or EMS or any of those folks, have we made his home unlivable? I mean, what's the legal ramification of that? How do we justify that, and how do we explain that? And then how do we compensate if we have done that? I mean, is this something we could?
I mean, it's not access to property is not our public obligation. If it's on a public road, that's a different story. I don't think these bridges that we're talking about are public roads, public right-of-ways. I think these are probably bridges that access from a private drive, which creates it. And you have the, Article 7, Section 14 of the Constitution that says you cannot spend public money for the benefit of a private landowner. And that's what all of these AG opinions circle around, is that you have to use it you have to prove that there's a need for drainage to spend this money. And there's not gonna be any liability. It's a sad situation, no doubt, Ms. Terry, but as far as legal liability on that particular circumstance that you said, I don't see any there.
Mr. President?
There's another layer I want to add into this, because this is a different circumstance, and this is the reason why we look at a lot of the bridges in our drainage structure, or bridges that were put in the past that are too low. So this is another layer. So what if we are raising and elevating that bridge? That improves drainage, that has a public benefit. Does it reach past the 50%? That's what I'm not sure of, but it is there. Now, that sounds easier than it is. Ron and I have had discussions on what that actually costs, actually raising and shoring up and making sure there's not a liability standpoint on our end of, and when that is elevated, making sure the ramps are correct and the structures underneath are correct to make sure that is a safe structure. So even then, it's very expensive, but that is that layer in there where it is impeding drainage. And do we have the right to raise it? So I'm not telling you it's right or wrong. I'm adding that layer in because that is something we're dealing with and it needs to be discussed.
And I'd just like to add this at the end, let's face it, our own equipment, our dump trucks, our tractors, I know, Ron, we've had some fall-ins, okay? We've had some fall-ins with, private companies, the dump trucks falling in. If, once we get to this, I guess more or less, right away goes back just like what we were talking about with the covers. You're gonna have to have the tools to negotiate the right-of-way with this. You know, we drain in 3 and 4 or 5 districts through a lot of this stuff, okay? And the reason I use the tractors are using these bridges because they fell in, okay? So there is a use in this parish for these bridges and for our employees to cross them and cut them. If any way possible, we can eliminate, I know we're looking at box covers on all of these, you know, when we replace out, try to go with the box covers, and we are through. Again, I would like to, you know, while we're looking at this, y'all have the ability to negotiate the right-of-way on these, where we're trying to replace the bridge or what we can do with it. And I would say out of the majority, you're gonna find a public use one way or the other. Either it's gonna be our workers using it or EMF. Somebody's gonna cross it, okay? So it's gonna be to identify them, and if we can get rid of them using box culverts, that's where I'm at with this. And it's just gonna be eliminating as we go through, because I'm gonna tell you, this is gonna be some work here. And I hope everyone was able to add and bring it back again. Mr. Ron?
Just real quick on that, just have this in mind. If we get into maintenance of these bridges, we don't have a bridge crew. We don't have in staff right now. The budget of this would be very expensive. And as you said, we got one right now we're about to have to repair damage on and pretty much replace. So we mess it up, we have to fix it. But to get back into maintenance as we did in the early 2000s, we got out of this. And so if we go back in there, I just caution that we're going to have to staff it. Rail car bridges, you go pick one up, first thing's going to happen is the deck's rotten. I need metal work. Well, you better get a welder or a fabricator. That's sheet metal, and bulkhead work underneath it. Who's going to supply the material? If you elevate it, that might be building up a road to and from it 2 foot. If you raise it up 2 foot, you got to build a driveway up to 2 foot. So those are some of the things that we may not be thinking about right now, but we really need to make sure that the policy protects us, because that's the biggest deal here is liability. So it's not that we don't want to help, but legally, we need the backing to get involved with this or not get involved with it. So please keep that in mind. Budgets, safety, and liability here. And we'll go from there.
All right, Ms. Terry?
I just want to remind you to keep in mind that all of that is, while I understand that all that is true, somebody living across a bridge that was allowed to build a house there decades ago had no way to know that one day they couldn't get to their house. And so and those folks are generally going to be elderly. I just ask you to be compassionate in your
Yes, ma'am.
approach, if you will, please.
Mr. Rollback?
I agree with what Councilwoman Terry is saying. I think the problem can be addressed by the future. We don't allow these types of bridges to be built. We only allow bridges that are there for longevity and the height and the quality. I think we could look at limiting it to actually fallen or completely all access lost. Now you have to work within the aspects of the law, obviously, but that's just my thoughts on it. We don't want to do that to those citizens that have no other way. Not saying we're doing it to them, but I mean, you know.
Well, I think you have some homework to do on this. Appreciate all the conversation and all the input on that.
Should we maybe give them till August to get back with us on that one?
Well, with that many bridges, it'll take a little
How
while.
fast they want to move on.
I'm seeing some heads nodding over there, so I'm thinking August may even be too soon.
Okay, with that, on bridge policy, everyone's okay
Yes.
with that coming back? All right, we're gonna move on to E, an executive session for the New River Drainage Improvement
And
We
Mr.
should go
Chairman,
into
before you
executive
take
session.
up a vote on this, since we're going into executive session on three things, and each of them are going to require a vote, I'd ask that maybe you just take up all three agenda items, take separate votes, and then we'll reconvene once they're over.
Sure. And that will consist of the Fish Bayou flood control structure and also the Livingston Parish.
Yeah, but look, we need to do three separate roll call votes on it to comply with the law.
Okay, first roll call, Ms. Secretary, for the New River drainage.
Commissioner Robert,
Yes.
Commissioner Turner,
Yes.
Commissioner Ogeron,
Yes.
Commissioner Malonzo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawler,
Yes.
Commissioner Cazo,
Yes.
Commissioner Cagnolati,
Yes.
Commissioner Chairman Lambert,
Yes. All
Commissioner
right, we'll
Mason.
go on to the
Not here.
Fish Bayou flood control.
Yes. Commissioner Robert,
But
Yes.
need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion to go
second.
into executive session for item F.
Roll call.
Commissioner Robert,
Yes.
Commissioner Turner,
Yes.
Commissioner Ogeron,
Yes.
Commissioner Malonzo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawler,
Yes.
Commissioner Cazo,
Yes.
Commissioner Cagnolati.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to G, the litigation with Livingston Parish.
Motion.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Laren, second by Ms. Terry. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Robert,
Yes.
Commissioner Turner,
Yes.
Commissioner Ogeron,
Yes.
Commissioner Malonzo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawler,
Yes.
Commissioner Cazo,
Yes.
Commissioner Cagnolati.
Yes.
Chairman.
Yes. We're in executive session.
was seeing him out there getting the data out of it.
Yeah, you
Trying
got
to open
to
the
pull the
closure.
plug over there, bro. Man, how did things get
crowd.
so out of whack here?
Like to make a motion to reconvene?
Motion by
Second.
Mr.
Second.
Chase. Second by Mr. Ogeron to reconvene. Mr. Johnny, executive session for the New River drainage improvement.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a motion to accept the request from B&K Contractors to terminate their contract with Ascension Bank.
Second.
Second by Ms. Terry. Any opposition to the motion? Not? Motion passed. We okay on executive session for Fish Bayou? G, litigation for Livingston Parish. Mr. Chase.
I'd like to make a motion, I guess it'd be more of a resolution, no? Well, I'd like to make a motion for, President Quimmel and his administration to start looking into all Livingston Parish drainage jobs
For adverse impacts on Ascension Parish.
for adverse impacts on Ascension Parish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Terry. Any opposition? Motion passed.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by Mr. Robert. Second by Mr. Johnny.
Should we start having